And we are live. Matt, brother, thank you for joining me. I called you the jack of all trades in the show notes for this podcast because I feel like that's what you are. I, I know a lot of knowledgeable people that are knowledgeable on the depth of specific topics, and I consider myself a pretty good researcher, but I got to say, man, I don't know many people with a depth of knowledge that you have on a variety of topics. And like right before we started recording, I was like, so luckily I've never even heard of electroculture farming really. Like I loosely know what it is, but not to the depth that you do. And I started asking you like, okay, so what are some other, you know, topics that relate to that? And you went into like 10 things. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be great. So thank you for joining me, man. And I guess the first place to start with this is just asking, what is electroculture?
So electroculture is the harnessing of the Earth's energy, right? So with our whole entire farming practice, we've been pushed into a narrative of using chemicals, right? Chemical farming, big agriculture, monoculture, single crops, pesticides. There's over 4 billion pounds of pesticides sprayed all over the crops every single year, and then they're harvested, and then they're put into the grocery store and sold to the general public, and it's deemed safe according to the guidelines and everything else. But so we have this chemical farming problem, and basically we need a solution, and electroculture can be that. We don't need to use pesticides, we don't need to use fertilizers, and we don't need to use any types of chemicals. We can just use the Earth's energy that's all around us. So, in a simplified term, what electroculture is basically you're creating antennas, fractal antennas, all different types of designs, whatever you would like to design them. You can basically take some copper, say, take a piece of wood, wrap it with copper, and then place it into the earth and put it next to your plants. And what you'll start to notice is your plants will just start growing like crazy. They'll start getting bigger, you'll start yielding more food, they'll be more frost resistant, they'll be cold resistant, heat resistant. You'll start to notice more insects come, more birds, more bees. You'll start to notice all this life come back. Because basically, what's happening is all of this chemical farming and what's going on is diminishing the life force of the planet, right? So when we use electroculture, then we start to bring back that life force, which has now gone missing. And then we start to notice all of our plants go crazy and we start to grow more food. We start to have abundance. Our soil gets better, the insects come back, everything starts to balance and harmonize itself. So, in a nutshell, electroculture is pretty much just using the Earth's energy that's all around us, that's free, and harnessing that so that we can boost our plant growth and then basically have more plants, have more nutritious plants, and then also be able to combat all the nonsense that we face all the time, right? Because everything is shifting with all these frequencies and towers and all this stuff that they keep putting out,
Yeah.
and it's diminishing the soil, and then people are having harder times gardening, growing, trying to get food. It's interesting because I was thinking about it. Why is it so much of a challenge for people to grow their own food, but the grocery store always has food? And I always think about that because that's to build the dependence on the grocery
Of
store
course.
instead of us growing our own food. And that's where you get into all these chemicals which have been put into the pesticides and that whole industry that's sold at Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, whatever else, to make it very difficult for you to grow your own food without their drugs that they're trying to sell you. So electroculture was this practice which was used. If we go into the history of it, it was a practice which was used during the 1800s, from the 1880s to about the 1940s. It vanished around the 1940s because of the fact that after World War II, they needed to put these chemicals somewhere and things needed to go somewhere. So they started going into the soil. And a lot of the books, which I'm going to mention today, and a lot of the information I will mention today, a lot of that was all pretty much removed. There was only one book left on electroculture, and then there were only a couple other books which were still remaining by other authors that related to electroculture that also basically went missing, and there were only digital copies left of a lot of these books because they would end up in some library or whatever it was. But a lot of this information was either suppressed or removed from society because that's the only way that chemical farming, in my opinion, could take over, right? Because if all of the knowledge is lost and you didn't have the internet at that time, right?
Mhm.
Then you couldn't see something different. You were never exposed to something different because you didn't have the access or the accessibility to see that. And so my whole goal was to bring back as much information about electroculture because we had that whole food shortage thing in 2020 and 2021, food shortage, as they told us. But in reality, a lot of that was just logistics of holding foods in warehouses and pretending like we were running out of food to cause people into a scarcity mindset and to control their mind. Now, what we need to do is take back our power by growing our own food and then getting connected to the soil as well. Because when we start to get connected to the soil, we can then build a better connection to our plants as well,
Mm-hmm.
build more food, and then also be more connected into nature, which is a very instant healing aspect as well.
Have you
So
ever heard of the Ringing Cedars of Russia series?
I have not. It
Okay,
sounds
it's a book series. Long story short, essentially, Anastasia, who's the mystic, or I guess you could say prophet, that the book series is based on, she talks about how cultivating a relationship with your food actually makes it so that the food sort of chemically alters itself to produce nutrients that your body needs.
yes, yes. And so what they used to do back in the day was they would take a seed and they'd place it underneath their tongue before they planted it. And when you did that, you synced up to the plant because the plants are conscious, right? Everything is conscious. Everything is alive. You know,
Mhm.
there's ether, there's energy, there's all this chi, prana, whatever word you want to call it. It's all around us. But the actual plants are alive and they can read your thoughts. Marcel Vogel actually had a lot of information on this with his books and crystals. And he basically stood, this was funny, he stood in front of plants in his backyard and told his wife, until the plant talks to me, I'm not coming back in the house. And his wife's like, you're out of your mind, you're losing it. I don't know what you, why you're doing this and whatever else. But he goes, no, the plants are communicating. I can tell you they're communicating. And it was interesting because at one point he did receive the information he was trying to receive about crystals. He was one of the founders of LCDs, which is liquid crystal display, right?
Wow.
That was the original screen. Now we have this garbage LED and whatever else. But he was big into plants because he was understanding that he learned from another guy. I believe his name was Baxter or Baxter, whichever it was. And this guy, I mean, it was really crazy with him because he basically did studies on plants of where if you took two plants and you placed them next to each other and you took, like, let's say like a lighter, and you burned one of these leaves and then you basically had the other plant next to it, he put like a EKG machine on this plant over here.
Oh, is this the book, The Secret Life of Plants?
Yes, that's what it
Yeah.
goes into.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so he showed the differences of how these plants responded, and they started to cower, and their cells started to get scared. So when people are putting the seed in their mouth and placing it into the earth, their emotion that they also present to the plant will also dictate how the plant is growing. If you show your
Wow.
plant love and care, your plant will read your mind before you even go to touch your plant. Number two, if you are injured from a distance, and that's what I found really interesting about this study, this guy got injured about 2,000 miles away when he was on vacation. And when he went to go find out about his plants were injured because the plants had synced to his brain. So
Wow.
the connectivity was there and they're syncing up. It's kind of like, you know, if you've been together with somebody for a long period of time, you can almost read their thoughts. It's kind of like that. So same thing with the plants. The plants are synced up, and then the plants are then also synced up to the moon, as it's the full moon in the next couple of days as well too. So all of this syncing that we just don't see, that we've lost connection with because of, in my opinion, technology, right? People
Yeah.
have been connected to technology and they're not looking around at these beautiful plants and trees that are all around us, and they're not getting care and love anymore. And they did all these studies where when the plants stopped getting care and love, the plants just died. It wasn't water, it wasn't minerals, it wasn't anything. It was just care and affection because they're living substances. And it was crazy because yesterday in front of our building, they just literally took a chainsaw, which probably taunted and scared all the other plants in the area, but just chainsawed a tree for no apparent reason and just cut the whole thing down. And birds and all this ecosystem all live on that. And it's just crazy because that's the disconnection, right? We don't
Yeah.
understand that when we affect one thing, we're going to affect something over here as well too.
How did you how did you even get introduced to electroculture farming to begin with?
So it started a while back. Okay. So if we go into the short story, is I did an Akashic reading, right? And I did an Akashic reading to find out about past lives and find out all this information and whatever else, just to do it. I just wanted to do it just to see what would come up and the information that would be presented. And the lady that I met, she's from Ireland. she told me that I should look into crop circles. And I was like, I don't know what that's going to mean. And this was like,
quick tangent. What do you think about those? What are your thoughts on crop circles? What do you think they're caused by?
so I would say that they're okay. So have you ever seen like cymatics, which is like the
Yes.
sound and the salt
Yep.
and everything else?
Yep.
So I would say it's a sound frequency imprint put into the earth to deliver a message, to talk in a language to connect to us. But
Yeah.
because we don't know what it's saying, if that makes sense, because like we don't understand the sound frequency and sound language, that it can be confusing. But you know, it's interesting because in the last year, Google has actually removed anything related to crop circles and has started to debunk all of that. So I
Wow.
thought, well, if it's not real, because they told us first, they came out with those movies. Remember the
Yeah,
goofy?
where like dudes would take wooden planks and stuff and
Yes.
like knock them down. It's like this is how they're making crop circles, and it's like, no, that intricate design that there's no way a couple dudes with wooden planks made that overnight in the dark while everyone was sleeping. No chance.
Well, and that's the thing is you look at some of these designs and it's fascinating because the lady who I talked to, she goes, "You'll be able to read them," and I'm like, "Okay." So she's like, "Just go look at them and you'll figure it out." And so I'm like, "All right." So I went to the website and I started looking them up and I started looking at each year, whatever else, and I started just looking at them. And I was like, these kind of remind me of like some sort of either like I said, a sound imprint
Yeah.
or like a patent, some sort of like design patent of technology
Yeah.
or something shifting in the planets. Because sometimes you'll see like a double eclipse with the two moons, and you'll see pretty much what's going up in the air. You'll see out down on the ground. So I thought, okay, maybe it's trying to show that. And when I started getting into that, I started getting into like pyramid energy and all the stuff with pyramids and the ancient information of pyramids. And I found this old book, Pyramid Power, and I started reading that, and I started getting into these things. And I was like, this lady's talking about how well, we need to praise the earth and we need to say thanks and we need to say beautiful words and prayers and all these beautiful things towards the earth and whatever else. And when I started getting into that, I started studying at the same time that led me into the everything about copper and bronze and this whole age which has been completely removed from history. There's no importance of copper ever in history. There's no importance of bronze. It's always iron, 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 iron. And that's a whole nother topic we could talk about. But anyway, so I got into that. And then when I went into that, I started looking at Victor Schauberger. And I started understanding all of Victor Schauberger's work, and everything started connecting. And I started going, if you use copper in the soil and you produce more food, maybe there's something we're missing here. And then it just dived into all these different rabbit holes of different people who were using copper in the 1900s and 1930s to heal people from all different types of ailments. So I thought, okay, well, if they heal people, right, if I take copper and wrap it around my wrist or around my back or around my neck or around wherever it may be that I have pain, and that pain goes away, well, what happens if copper goes around a plant, right, or copper goes near a plant? And it was interesting because Google gives you the opposite. Copper is toxic, it's poisonous, it's blah, 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 blah. But in reality, it's the iron that's really what I've learned is the toxic situation. And it's funny because all the copper stuff, everything you look up, it will come up as the same thing as poisonous, but the iron is always safe. And I've realized since everything is always inverted, in my opinion, then you start to see, this kind of makes sense of what we've never been told. And when I started researching copper tools and how people were yielding more food with copper tools, I was like, wait a minute, what? If you go to Home
Literally
Depot,
just like copper gardening tools, right?
copper gardening tools.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I started researching that, and then that led into the whole electroculture situation and all the people. So the three main people in electroculture, and this is just people who, if they want to research, they can look them up. You can look up George Lakhovsky, you can look up Victor Schauberger, and you can look up Justin Christo Flo. And those are the three people I always talk about. Now, George Lakhovsky created the multi-wave oscillator, which is a device which was used to heal people based on frequency, right? So you would get for example, a 10-minute zap, basically, that's the best way to say it, in these rings, these copper rings that were all around you, and it would heal your cells. It was a high frequency. It was like
Wow.
the Tesla devices as well.
Got it.
But he also had a study where he took these plants that had these tumors and all these growths, right? They put the growths in there because we know how that works. But anyway, so we put the growths in there and they started developing these growths. He took copper and he wrapped it in a circle around the plant, and he put a piece of rubber into the plant, and he noticed that the cancerous areas of that, or the tumor areas of those plants just started falling off. And that
Wow.
plant started growing like 4 times the size of the controls over here that weren't growing as much. So George Lakhovsky understood so much of this, and George was also a man about copper because he basically created copper little wristlets and all different types of things that he put over 10,000 people. He had journals of how many people he healed with copper, just putting
Wow.
copper around their body. And this isn't even like, a double blind, whatever nonsense. He had 10,000 people go through all these. All of
Wow.
these people with inflammation, arthritis, back pain, brain fog, whatever you can think of, pretty much, he was pretty much fixing at that time. Now, they basically said all of his work, even though he had 10,000 people who he used in that, was all nonsense. It was all quackery, and that's that whole Rockefeller
Of
takeover, flood,
course.
or
Yeah.
nonsense, whatever. So, that was all thrown out. Then we fast forward to Victor Schauberger, right? So Victor Schauberger, he was over in Germany. He created the first flying saucer, right? The first device that basically flew off the Earth's energy, and that's using cold energy, because he basically said all of these cars and all of these things we have out here are basically only 13% efficient. Propulsion is only 13% efficient. So if you think about that, your car, you should be getting about 300 miles to the gallon. But anyway, so he was creating all these different devices, and he lived out in the forest, and he started studying, I believe it was Turkey. And in northern Turkey, they were using wood tools, and in southern Turkey, they were using iron, right? And he started to notice that the people using wood, their plants were growing like crazy, and the people using iron, their soil started drying out. It started
Wow.
getting all drought-like. It started drying up and getting all, ruined, like what we're kind of facing today, right? Dust Bowl. So, he started noticing all those things and going, this doesn't add up. And then he started creating a device called the bioplow. And the bioplow was basically this plow that would basically turn like a vortex as it pretty much plows. So it would make your life much easier, right? Because the average plow is going against the dirt, and it's got to go against resistance. This turns like a shark as it goes through the soil. So when he started doing this, he started also creating copper and bronze tools. As he created those, he gave them out to a whole bunch of different farmers, and he said, "Here, check this out. You go try this and let me know what happens." All of a sudden, they were yielding 3 to 4 times the amount of food that they used to be yielding. And they were like, "I don't know what's different. I'm just using these tools you gave me. I didn't change anything, just copper. That was it. Nothing was changed." And they started yielding more food. And Victor Schauberger basically went to the government at that time. I believe it was in Bulgaria. And he presented this to them. He goes, "Let me show you this situation. Let me show you what's going on." So he presents it to them, and they were like, "Well, that's a great idea, but I have a kickback with the pesticide company
Oh
and
my
the
God.
fertilizer company, and that's kind of going to go against my kickback if I present this to them." So they went out of their way purposely to basically go and do a news broadcast with the radio and the television back at that time, and put up all these articles and all these things that if you use copper tools, you will yield too much food and you won't make money.
What? You'll yield too much food and you won't make money. My goodness. So
So with
what is it about copper specifically that creates this effect? Is it that copper is able to more easily harness the ether, the energy that is readily available all around us?
so think of the earth, because everybody can say what is the earth and whatever else. Think of the earth as one big generator,
Mhm.
and think of the copper as a conductor to
Yeah,
help increase the conductibility of the planet, right?
got it.
So when they put all this iron in there, right, you're gunking up everything. The iron blocks the ability for the magnetism and the conducting and all the beautiful stuff that's going on with the planet. So it's interesting because every pesticide has iron in it, right? You look at all these pesticides, they put tons of iron, 4 different types of iron, and so they put all this iron in there. So what it leads to is your soil being like, just think of your body if it was just coated and you had all these particles inside of it and it just
Yeah.
couldn't function anymore. That's what the iron does. So when you use copper, on the other hand, it doesn't change the Earth's energy and also helps conduct so that it can enhance that energy. Because everything we're facing right now, right, like the stuff that goes in the air, the goofy towers, everything else, everything that's pulsing, all of that is impacting the soil, and it's deadening it out. It's killing the life force of the soil. So when you bring copper back into the soil and you start bringing copper tools and you start doing this, you start reversing all that, and then people's gardens just go pretty much crazy. And that's why when Victor Schauberger proposed all this, he was blown away that the government was like, "What do you mean? You're not going to help?" And then they told everybody he was a nutso and whatever else, the typical story and whatever. And he was also big on structuring water because he understood vortexes and understood levitation as well. He noticed that salmon, for example, at certain times of the moon, because it's about to be a full moon, but at certain times of the moon could jump out of the water and levitate. And they just levitated up the stream. They didn't jump, they were levitating because they could basically create vortexes, which is what you're doing with the copper as well, but creating these vortexes to basically to shoot themselves up and just go right up anything. So that's why he was big on the whole levitation, right? The anti-gravity, levitation, all of this stuff. Victor Schauberger was big on that. And like I said, a lot of his work was pretty much thrown away. And a lot of it, when he came over to America during Project Paperclip and that whole situation as well, he came to Texas. He presented all of his patents, and they basically said, "I don't know what you're doing here," right? And they asked, well, he asked them, like, "What do you mean? What am I doing here? I'm here to present you like the patents so you guys can create these technologies." And they were like, "Well, we're not going to be building them, so I don't know why you're here. You can just go back." And so he basically realized they wasted his time, and just so happened on his plane ride back home, he passed away, the typical story as he was traveling back. When he got to Germany, within 3 days, he died. Or I'm sorry, Austria. But, so this information pretty much was lost. And the reason he was so connected, and when I read all of his books, it made perfect sense, is because he basically said it's very simple. If you go against nature, nature will destroy you. If you go with nature, nature will protect you. That's it. When I look at all these straight lines and cutting down trees and making things perfect and all this goofy nonsense that doesn't make any sense, nature doesn't work that way. And either does water. When you take water and put it in a straight line, it does not function that correct way, because that's not how water moves. It moves.
Veda talks about that too, in conversations I've had with her. It's like, not only is it the metals and everything else that they're putting inside tap water, it's that water having to traverse through like straight line pipes is not natural for water, and
Yes.
it like eliminates the coherence and the structure of the water.
Yes, and that's why people are suffering from dehydration issues, because the hydrogen molecule of the water is being decimated. So you got to keep drinking more water, but the water is never giving you that water that you need. And then you combine it with all the towers, right, that are also dehydrating you and cooking the water out of the cells. And now you're ultra dehydrated. So he was big on the water situation, and we can talk about that as well. But with the last person, Justin Christo Flo, he was a guy from France who came to America, and he created different types of antennas using different types of wood and brass, and he presented the same stuff. And he started showing people, I got cabbage, 2 feet, whatever, 2-3 feet long, whatever. He had potatoes and tomatoes and all kinds of stuff, large things, and everything started growing double to triple the size. So he presented this here in America, but a lot of his information was removed. And there's only one book, which we have it listed on our website. It's just called Justin Christo Flo Electroculture. And it was a book that was just so happened by chance, somebody uploaded it in Australia at the library. And that's the only copy. I have not seen any copies. I have not seen any physical copy, because what I've noticed is, as I've gone into all of these topics and everything else that I talk about, a lot of the books that I order and a lot of the things that I look into, the books don't arrive, right? I don't get my book. The book somehow vanished. They send me a different book. Something always kind of flips with something. Or the book that I was looking at all of a sudden is out of stock and has all been bought up. The entire author, all the authors all their books are gone. And it's like, will everybody have an epiphany today that they all bought it? It just, especially today on January 4th, whatever.
Yeah, it's like it's collective consciousness, and everyone just had the idea come through them all of a sudden to purchase this book, or it's that they're trying to hide this information. It's probably the second one. The next question that I have is, can you talk me through like the effects that you've seen with your own eyes of using copper in your garden?
Cool. Yeah. So I have a moringa plant that I grew everything on the balcony. So remember, this is on a balcony. This is in a plastic pot. This is before I know anything, right? This is literally the
Mhm.
starting of everything, and this is with tap water. Like I'm gonna just go as bare basic just to explain. So I grew a moringa tree, and I just took the seeds and I put them in the plant. And I have a couple other things. I got basil and tomatoes and peppers, and I got like 75 cayennes and whatever. But with the moringa plant, we'll just go with that just to say the example. So with the moringa plant, it's already about 12 feet tall. You know, the leaves are falling off because it's winter time and whatever else right now. So, but with the moringa plant, I put just a simple copper, a piece of wood. It's from the video that I first made, just a piece of wood with a piece of copper. That was it. I pretty much made a little antenna and I stuck it in the ground. And I just thought, okay, well, we'll just see what happens. It's in the pot and I'm just going to let it do its thing. Now, when the moringa decided to seed, the normal moringa pods are usually about 6 inches, right? So they're pretty much about this size. Now I have a picture on our Instagram so everybody can see it and everything else. One pod was 14 inches, right?
Whoa.
And then the other pod was 22 inches.
Whoa.
And this is on a balcony. Like I'm not connected to Earth. That's why I'm trying to say this at the, whatever. And then basically the pods were gigantic. Now I have a cayenne plant right now that has about 75 cayennes on it, and it's a little bush about this big. So it's just what you'll start to notice is the flowers. You'll start to notice more flowers. You'll notice more bees. I got grasshoppers that are like literally this large that come onto the balcony. I have every bird. I have every hummingbird. I have every bee. I have every insect you can think of. Like I started noticing that they all sit on our balcony. And
Wow.
that's what I was saying. When I started doing these things, I started noticing that all the stuff started coming around like more than ever, right? Like, cause I'm on a street, right? Like the street's right here. So, there's no reason for anything to really come around. There's nothing, it's up on a balcony and we're on the third floor, right? So
Mhm.
no reason for anything to come up there. So not only that, but I went into the canal, which is right next door to me, and I started doing different types of drawings into the soil. I started making vortexes into the soil just to see what happens, right? Just because it was another test I wanted to do because electroculture also ties into sacred geometry. They both go hand in
Mhm.
hand. So what I started to notice was when I started doing that as well, that area in which I made the vortex, all the grass grew in the vortex, exactly in the what I made in the circle.
And that's without using any of the copper or anything, right? That's literally just making a vortex
That's
designs in the wow.
because you're creating your brain creates, right? Like there's ether, you're always creating. Right now I'm creating this podcast. Like that's what's pretty much happening. So, same thing as when you project it into the earth and you draw or design, you're also projecting that into the earth. And those designs, each different design, which relates all the way back to what we were talking about, crop circles, each different design also emits a certain sound or frequency. And a
Mhm.
vortex, which is, life, right? Because everything spins in a vortex. When you put that into the soil, you are now creating that energy lifeline right there on top of whatever lifelines or ley lines are also there. Now, you can also do different designs. You could do different stuff with like hexagons. You could do different stuff with pyramids. You could do different stuff with squares. And the other interesting thing that I noticed was when I would go to the canal and I would create these designs, I would chant, right? I would do meditations and chant. And I do all different types just to kind of go through the different, the sounds and whatever.
Yeah.
But different images or different designs in the soil would emit different sounds.
Mm.
So, you really, so what I did was I took my buddy and I go, let me show you something. I'm like, you come with me. I'm going to show you something. And you do this up to your ears and you do all this and blah, blah, blah. And I go, you tell me how you feel afterwards, right? I'm just going to pick a random spot. I'm not even going to do it like on a sacred geometry, like nothing else. Random spot. I'm going to do this. So I took him over there and he felt relaxed for 2.5 weeks. He goes, I've never felt
Wow.
this relaxed before. He goes, my energy is crazy. And what I started to notice is that you could do that anywhere. You could create something anywhere and you could create energy to bring back the life force that's been diminished anywhere as well. And I've also noticed if you want to take it a step further, you can make it windy, you can make it hot, you can make it cold, you can change your atmosphere as well too, right? I've shown my buddies where we'll go up on a spot, go up on a mountain, And I'll show you, I'll make it windy just by drawing and designing into the earth, because what are you doing? You're emitting a frequency. And that goes
So
back
cool.
into, like the rain dances and shamanism, druidism, and all the people being connected, right, to the earth. They were in sync with, let's say the moon and all of these different periods, so that they could sync up to the energy. And in 3 days, we have the full moon, which relates to the best time to harvest, because the plant's sap is at the perfect balance, so that when you do go to harvest your food, you get the best flavor, because that's where the flavor of the plant comes from, is the sap. If the sap is not perfectly in the middle, then you kind of can get a bitter or like a different salty, whatever else. But once at the full moon, it's always the best to harvest or the best to plant, because the energy of our system that we're on is at its highest point, which is why we get all this energy as well too as people. And that's why I've started to notice that all of this electroculture and all these topics we're talking about today just also relate to us as well as humans. And it's all connected. And you've had so many people show this that, it's funny because it's there, you look at through all into history, and you see when you go back in time, there's been so many people to show the same patterns over and over again, that it can't just be by chance. If every 30 years somebody shows the same thing, it means it's there. It's
Yeah.
right. It doesn't have to, it's not placebo, it's not woo woo, it's not quackery, it's not whatever. It's evident. That's pretty much how I see it. So it started to show me all this stuff, and it really connected me more into the earth. And even my little balcony garden, if I can do it, anybody can. And
Yeah,
so,
and let the listeners know where you live too, because that adds even more context to how powerful electroculture farming is.
of course, so we're in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it
Yeah.
gets 122 degrees in the summer. And I've watched myself be cooked into the earth as well as the plants,
Yeah.
and they go through all of this. And also too, being not in the earth, you got cars in front of me, which emit noise, which also damage life, right? And then you got LED lights, which also damage life. You have cell phone towers, also, the list goes on and on. So if I can do it, anybody can. And so what started happening was, as social media kind of went crazy when I put the little antenna video up, people started doing it, and their gardens are like just gone through
We've
the
already
roof.
had a few people in the comments saying that too, that they've been using electroculture and their gardens are going nuts. Can you talk to me about the best way to get started with electroculture, and like where are you sourcing your? Is that a copper mug?
That's it, baby. That's what we got.
I love it, love it. So, um, for those listening, he just picked up a copper mug, so I had to. I want to talk about like copper for personal healing, but before that, I would like to, talk about what did I just ask you again? I forgot.
You're asking about best places to get copper.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Best way to get started with electroculture for those that are watching and listening.
So we have a blog, Electroculture for Beginners. And if you just go to Google, you can type that in and it'll come up. And we give a little thing in there. There's some videos and all different types of documentation in which they can look through, like a FAQ, how tall they should do it, everything else. But the easiest way is make it real simple. You can go to Home Depot. You can get a wood dowel that's like 3 feet, right? Just a piece of wood. Or you can find wood in your backyard, so that it's more in sync with your own backyard, right? Because that's also a better option. And then you can get a copper wire, and it can be any gauge, it can be whatever you want, and you're just going to tie it up like a vortex, and you're going to put it facing up towards the sky. Just that's it. And you're going to take the other piece of copper, and you're just going to place it into the earth. And the taller you make that wood dowel, the more energy you will gather from the atmosphere, right? Because back in the 1900s, 1920s, they used to use atmospheric energy to run cars, to run power, to run buildings, to do all kinds of things. They obviously aren't going to talk about that, but that's what they did, right? So what you're doing is you're providing that energy to your plants so that their sap can move around. Because basically what happens is, if there's sap, so if you have your plant here and the sap is going up and the sap is going down, if this sap doesn't move, the plant cannot deliver nutrients to the rest of the plant.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're helping to do is you're helping to boost that plant's sap and the blood, the life force of the plant, so that it can go up and down. And then it can also provide nutrients to the rest of its area, because remember, all plants are communicating between each other as well too. So if you plant something, it's going to communicate with something else. So with electroculture, when you're doing this, you're basically placing these antennas. That's one option. Now, if you want to take it to the next level, what you can do is you can get a You can get a CD that plays, or songs or music that play bird frequencies, right? So this is the second level, bird frequencies. Now, remember, DDT is good for me, 1950s. They hurt a lot of birds and they killed a lot of birds during that time because the bird frequency, when the bird chirps or the rooster chirps at about 4 in the morning, it signals the plants to open up their stomata so that they can absorb nutrients. So if you play bird sounds around your plants, what you'll start to notice is your plants will start to go towards the sound and go away from the sun.
Whoa.
Then you start to think, well, are they going towards the birds, or are they going towards the sun? So that's the second way of elevating your garden, right? You play some bird sounds. That's the next one that you can do, because then you're now bringing that harmony and that peaceful symphony. And they've done it with classical music. They've done it with all different types of things. They've even done studies. Dan Carlson had a boom box where he would basically play bird sounds and spray fermented wine all over his plants, and the plants would grow extraordinary and whatever. But it was fascinating because all his work, I was like, wow, yeah, because sound resonance, right? But if you take heavy metal and you play it next to the plant just dies, because the plant is like, what are you doing? You're bombarding me with all this hurts, and you're messing with their mind. So that's the second level. The third level, if we're going to take it to the next one, is getting basalt or volcanic clay or quartz or anything that resonates at a piezoelectric effect, and placing that in your garden as well too. Because think of your soil as an electrical, a little box. And quartz is what's in this computer. Quartz is what's in these lights. Quartz is what's in everything. And when you're putting basalt or volcanic clay, you're basically bringing back the magnetism that's off in the soil. So you start to put that in there, and you can now enhance your plants even more. That's why when you go to Hawaii or Alaska, right, those two places specifically, they are on magnetic ley lines, in which it's the highest, but they also have the most volcanoes. Those volcanoes basically, cook everything and then turn it to ash. That ash is then placed into the soil again, and those little quartz crystals are put all into the soil, and then you enhance your yield even more. And that's the thing, is there's so many different things. There was a guy who created a quartz. He took like a PVC pipe and put it in his backyard, and he put quartz in there. And anytime he had an insect problem of like too many whatever little, let's say, beetles or whatever else, he would take an essential oil, pour 1 drop into that quartz PVC pipe, and all of the insects that he wanted to get rid of would all go away. And that was it. He didn't have to.
I wonder if that was like enhancing the life force of the plant to where the insects did not. Let me back up. I've seen some research, I think it was put out by Daniel Roytos in a podcast episode that he did for Humanely. And there's evidence that insects typically don't eat plants that aren't like super healthy.
Yep.
They're only consuming plants that are already on their way out, essentially.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. So the insect comes to clean up, right? So if you have an infestation, it's because something is off balance, and it might be your soil, or it might be the plant itself. And most likely it's the soil, right? That's the easiest way, because people, let's say if you're going to Home Depot, Lowe's, and you're buying all those chemical concoctions and you're placing it on your soil, the first thing that's going to go is the plant. And the plant is going to emit frequencies to bring the bugs. And what was interesting is when you use copper, the bugs don't want to come around, other than like pollinators, bees and everything else. Mm-hmm. But they don't want to come around because your plant is healthy. There's no reason for those bugs to come and clean everything up or to eat it all, right? Because they're not going to get anything out of it. It's too strong. The plant is too powerful. The life is, there's too much energy there. And you're going to have spiders. Remember, because you get the little baby spiders, like just the ones that are on there. Those are going to take care of any of those little bugs that decide to try to come over there. But when you're spraying all those chemicals, what's the first thing that go? The spider. The thing that, the beautiful insect, that's the little jumping ones especially. But, the ones that are there to help balance things out. And it's interesting because when I look at people who grow food or just farming or everything that I've learned in the last couple of years, it's always an adapter to an adapter to an adapter and to an adapter. Right? We never fix the root problem, which is the soil and the plant, and address this. We just keep, I'm going to sell you this, and then I'm going to sell you that. And then, when that doesn't work, I'm going to sell you this as well. And it's interesting because why are people struggling so much to grow food in their backyard? Is it really that it's just because it's 2022 or 23, whatever it is? Or is it the fact that a lot of this stuff has been gunking up the soil for a long period of time and people weren't aware of what it was, that it was a long-term thing, and now we have to revolve that back. And that's where electroculture can come in and just reverse it instantly. Because I've watched people's gardens. I have a buddy in Australia who's been sending me so many photos. He's got apples, corn, all kinds of stuff. This is in like a month. He doesn't even have to. It's crazy. I had another lady in Ireland. She's got garlic. It grew out of the ground within 2 weeks. She's like, I don't see it for 8 months. This thing's supposed to sit here. Like, it's supposed to just do its thing. So it's like when you really look at these things, you start to see, well, then how much abundance can we have? Right? We've been put in this fear mindset, but how much abundance is truly possible? And I think it's a lot more than what we've been shown, because that's what they work on. They work on bringing us into this fear. We're running out, foods, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, right now, even if, let's say, all the grocery stores disappeared, guess what? There's a ton of food outside. There's plants all over the place. There's all kinds of things. But we've been deconditioned because we're no longer connected to nature to even know what is food or what is healing or what herbs we should be collecting. And that goes all into the witches, right? The witches, the shamanism, the druids, all of that, like removing those people from society, because those people were connected to nature and they could provide you something for free. There was no cost, right? They would go into nature, they'd go collect some herbs and they'd bring them back. But they said we got to get rid of those people because those people are a threat to this current system.
Yeah, demonizing them and like making them synonymous with something that's satanic or Luciferian, so then people are so averse to them.
Yes. And that's the same thing with dowsers, right? People who go with dowsing rods and go and find ley lines and go find water. They were also, kicked out because they're going against the kingdom. They were the ones finding all the water for free. They didn't have to go to the king or the kingdom to get their water. They could get it for free and they could give it to their family. And then they are now a threat because they're not under the rule or the power. So my thing is the reason I've been advocating so much of this and all of the stuff in which I've been talking about is because there are solutions to everything. And every single thing has a counter. No matter what it is, there is a counter. And I started to realize that, and it started all connecting me into energy, ether, all this stuff. And when you look at these old sacred buildings, right? So now we can take it a little farther back. You look at churches, you look at temples, you look at mosques, you look at all these buildings. What do they have on top of them? They have a rod that was called a lightning rod, which doesn't work that way. But in general, they had a lightning rod on top. What did that lightning rod have? It had a piece of copper or wire that ran down all the way down into their garden to make their garden go crazy. That's why when you look at every sacred building, all these different buildings, cathedrals, everything you can see, they always have an antenna on top. And that was enhancing their plant growth. And they always had the best plant growth because not only were they harnessing the free energy, they were also harnessing primary water, which was directly below them on a ley line. So they had structured water and electroculture at the same time, but you would never know because it was never discussed. And that's why I have been trying to do my best to bring light to this topic, because that's the same thing. This stuff has been hidden. So we are dependent on the nonsense and then don't know what's wrong, because you can never find out that the root cause of pretty much all gardens failing and plants not growing and everything and whatever is just either they're not getting love, they're not having like electricity, or they're just the soil. You have pretty much just let it all go, and now you're just left with nothing. And then you're wondering why your plants are not doing what they're doing, is because those three things are some of the most important things of what's needed, and water as well too, structured water as well.
It's really cool. This episode so far is like tying in the intention and the energetics behind growing food. And it relates so much to the episodes I've done recently with Melissa Sell in Germany Medicine, Eileen Biofield Tuning, even Lisa in homeopathy. It's like they all relate so much, just the energetic aspect of things and intention and how much that impacts the process itself. And I feel like we totally forget that in gardening. I mean, even me having a garden in my backyard, this is making me want to be more intentional with growing my own food.
Well, the other thing too is, what kind of shoes are you wearing while you're gardening?
I'm usually barefoot.
Good. That's what I like to hear, because then you're connected and imprinting into the earth. But that's another, right? You got rubber shoes. What else we got? Rubber hose, right? You got a rubber hose, which is made out of plastic. It's destructuring the water before it's even used. And it's interesting because I was researching into the old hoses, which they used to use at the fire department, which was interesting. Cotton and linen. And what does linen do? It does not gather electrical static. That's why if a person sleeps in linen sheets, they don't get restless leg syndrome and everything else, because they can't gather static. But basically, the old hoses were made out of a natural material so that the water would flow naturally and it would curve the way it's supposed to. So, when we're doing these practices, like you said, of just gardening and being connected, all of this is energy. And whatever energy we are then giving out also is going to be put into the soil and then reflected back at us. And in relation to energy, because there's a couple things which I think are fascinating with energy, is you have, why do dogs always spin in a circle before they use the bathroom?
I don't know. Tell me.
Because the fact that they're trying to connect to the northern point, the magnetic ley lines, right? They're spinning so that they can pick up where that frequency is, where to go. Now you have birds. Why do birds spin in a circle before they go somewhere? They're connecting to the vortex ley lines of the earth in order to know where to go for their GPS. And then last but not least, you have bees, right? The bees are all gathering around, they're flying around, they're connected to the magnetism of the earth. So what happens is when you're enhancing this and you're bringing all these things back, right? Like electroculture, you're putting this all back into the soil. All of a sudden, you'll notice you got cats or dogs sitting next to your electroculture devices or your pyramids, whatever it may be. You have birds coming in from all over the place, and then you got bees all the time. I don't ever have to worry about pollinators because I always have them. They just sit. Usually, they'll sit on your hand and whatever else, but they just sit on my plants because the fact that they see this energy, they see infrared, they see UV, right? The stuff we've been told is bad. It's always bad.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so, they see those energies and they pick up on that. That's the same thing as someone picking up on your aura. It's the same exact thing. The plants are picking up on your aura. Your friends, if I meet you, are picking up on your aura. All of this is connected. And what really blew my mind when I got into the whole pyramid situation and like putting pyramids and copper pyramids, if you put
Actually, that was the question that someone had. Can I pull up the question and maybe this relates? What about soldering copper piping together to build structures like a pyramid or something used for the garden?
So you can do that and put those all over. You can do it out of anything, right? You can do it out of copper. You can do it out of wood. You can do it out of brass, silver, gold, right? All these different types of metals. But you can place those all over. And what you're doing is you're creating a vortex, right? You're making life spin. That's the easiest way to say it, right? You're making life come back to spinning. Because the easiest way to describe everything in which we face today is this way is healthy, clockwise is healthy, counterclockwise is not healthy. And that's all you're bringing back. You're bringing back the ability for the body to be, and the plants and the trees and the insects and everything to be clockwise, to be healthy. And they are spending all of their time trying to make it the opposite, right? So that the cells just don't spin. And when the cells don't spin, they die. That's it. It's very, very, very simple. But the copper pyramids can be very beneficial. And it was interesting because there was a guy, it's going to slip my mind right now as I'm trying to think about it, but he basically used copper pyramids to preserve food. He basically would build copper pyramids. Les Brown, that's his name, Les Brown. So Les Brown would build copper pyramids and he would place food inside of it. What he noticed was it would preserve itself. It didn't need cold. It didn't need heat. It didn't need a fridge. It didn't need a freezer. He could preserve that food. So he'd put like an egg in there and it would never go bad because the energy you can't see inside that pyramid is preserving that food the entire time. He also noticed if you take that pyramid and you put seeds in there, that those seeds will grow 2 to 3 times the size that they normally are. And Les Brown created all these devices where with just a pyramid and wood and some wool, which is funny. And he created energy devices with just that alone. And he actually got shocked one time so bad because of how much energy he was creating. And it's fascinating because when you look at witches, what are they wearing? A pyramid hat, right? They have a pyramid on their head.
Yeah, wow.
Get rid of them. And it's interesting too, when you are bad in school, what do? They put a dunce cap on you, which is a pyramid that basically makes your cells spin back the opposite direction so that you can pay attention.
Wow. So I want to go back to the hose thing real quick. Have you found any hoses that are not plastic or that are using materials to help maintain the coherence of the water? Because my wife and I were talking about that a few weeks ago. We're like, it sucks that in our garden we have to use the hoses that we're using. So a lot of the times when we water our garden, we'll like take water that we structure with the analima wand and then like water our plants with that. But it's such a tedious process, which can be good because that means we're being more intentional and spending more time in our garden. But have you found any hoses that don't use these, plastic materials?
So if you were to look for those, you have to look at a fire department that's getting rid of the old hoses that are made out of linen and cotton. And you
Got
can
it.
find them online. Just type in linen hose and it'll come up. I think there's 2 fire departments that still sell them, and that's one option. The other option is you could get yourself a copper watering can, and you can basically change the design, right? So think of the spout, right? Think of, if we're going to take it another thing, look at how all watering cans are designed, right? The old school ones, like from Japan, Korea, and all of these things, had a very fine little dainty spout, right? And it was always curved. If you look at them, they always had a curve.
Mhm.
The new ones don't have a curve. It's just a straight line with a spout,
Wow.
whatever else. So simple thing would be you can get a copper, if you wanted a copper watering can, and you could get one with a curved spout. And as it pours out, you'll notice it's much quieter, which means that it's helping the water. And number 2, it'll help structure the water as it's pouring out, because that's how they did it. They had, the little thing, and I have one I'd show it to you, but I got to go get it. But you can pour that, and then that will help structure the water as well. And all I've realized is they've just destructured everything, right? Like that's the simplest way to put it.
Of
Everything
course.
is flipped around, and once we start, bringing it back, then we start to see it in our food, our energy, our health, our life, everything.
When you're watering your plants, what type of water are you using? Obviously, you're using structured water. How are you structuring your water and where are you getting your water from?
So right now, we have tap water, literally tap water out of Scottsdale, the canal, which is built in straight lines, so it's dead water. But I will use it in my copper. I will put it in my copper pots, and that copper pot will then, like I said, it has a little spout, and then that will help restructure it. The other thing you can do, which if you want to make it another way, is you can take your water, you can place it in a jug, like a terracotta clay or whatever you want to put it in, and you can shake it, right? So you would shake it 8 times to the right, and then 8 times to the left. Or you could stir it, right? You could stir it. I've done that too. You take a wood spoon and you just stir it 8 times to the right, 8 times to the left. What happens is you're creating structure in that water as well too. So you can bring back the structure of anything, whatever it is, because all it is an imprint. And those are just some simple ways that I've done to restructure the water. The other option is you can put some paramagnetic clay in your water, and then that can also help restructure it. That's basically the volcanic clay, because whatever you place into your water, whether it's a shape, whether it's an object, whether it's a stone, whether it's quartz, whatever it may be, the water will take on that imprint. So
Mhm.
back in the
Yeah,
day,
Veda's work has showed that like time and time again.
yeah. So back in the day, you could take like a silver spoon and you just sit there and you make a vortex and you go 8 times, right? And then you take a silver spoon and you go 8 times back. And now your water is structured. And the silver spoon, I think, costs you about $5. So I always try to find simple solutions to try to do things so that there's always something that somebody can do to help structure their water. And you'll notice the water will taste better. It'll be more crisp. It'll have more flavor. And the other thing too, even with copper, you'll notice the difference in the taste when you drink out of copper. You'll notice the difference in the taste if you drink out of brass, right? That's the holy water of India as well too. You'll notice a difference if you drink out of clay, because clay will structure the water instantaneously. All of these materials are never at the home store, right? Whenever you go to let's say you go to, I don't know, we'll just say Target or something. They don't really have a lot of materials. It's always stainless steel. It's always iron,
Mhm. So
iron, iron,
true.
iron, 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 iron. That's all they ever give you. But when you go maybe, let's say, to like CB2 or Pottery Barn, somewhere else or whatever else, then they might have different materials. But you'll notice when you use those materials, they'll taste better. Similar to when people ate with chopsticks, right? They ate with chopsticks so that they did not change the magnetic frequency of their food when they were eating it. When you put
Wow.
iron into there and the stainless steel into there, you deaden the flavor. So what do you got to use? More salt, more spices, and more things in there to try to rebalance that. But you don't realize that your actual plate and your utensils are actually diminishing the flavor So you keep just trying to add more to it because you're changing the electrical structure of the food and what you're consuming.
Does it come from someone that explains Chinese tea rituals using clay?
Yep, yep, yeah, and also too with the water, and they use different types of pots, and they would pour pots into pots, and they put a pot on their head, right? That's another thing too. They carry the water on their head. If for example in India, they carry the water on their head because it's on your crown chakra, right? So then you're
Uh,
connecting the water to your mind, and then that's syncing to this beautiful body that you have, and all of these things, when we look at these practices of what people were doing, we just lost track of that because people be like, why are you doing that, why are you stirring in the water and whatever else, like it just
Especially with Western culture, right? I can't even talk about how many, like weird practice or see, I even just said it, weird practices, intentional practices I do where some of my friends who, already think I'm crazy see me doing it. And they're like, dude, why the hell are you doing that? I'm like, dude, it's bringing back intention. It's connecting to spirit.
well, and the more you're connected to all of those things, right, the more you can pick up on that, and then you start
Yeah.
to always pick up on that, and then you can meet people and pick up on that, and it's
Yeah.
all connected. Like when I was in the fitness world and in the gym world and saw people lift 1,000 pounds and deadlift 1,000 pounds and bench 626 pounds and all these numbers, I watched energy transfer from people to people. Right when I
Yeah.
spotted my buddy squat 1,000 pounds, I we're literally as one. Right, and they're
Yeah.
dividing that energy between us. That's what they've worked
Yeah.
on doing for a long period of time. And this goes into your food too. If you take the life force out of the food, guess what? You got no nutrients, and you're going to be nutrient deficient, and you're going to fall apart. So
Yeah.
they're separating us from, like you said, that energy, the spiritual energy, ether, whichever word you'd like to call it. But once you start connecting to that, it's impossible not to be connected. It's like picking up a rock, right? Like picking up quartz, and you can feel it in your hands, or you can pick up something and you can pick up that energy. Once you start doing that, you always want to do that because you're always, in my opinion, you're always feeling connected. Versus the deadening side was you weren't really paying attention to it because they've deadened us with LED lights, all the Wi-Fi, all the frequencies. What's the first thing the frequency goes into? The pineal gland, right? What's the first
Mhm.
thing the LED lights are doing? Going into the eyes, which go into the same thing.
Yeah.
All these
And
glands.
another interesting thing too is the lens of your eye is the highest concentration of structured water in your body. So think
Yes.
about that.
Yes, and you're one big crystal, right? When I go to give you a hug, it's a piezoelectric effect of squeezing all the crystalline structure in your body. And what are they breaking down and what are they trying to destroy? Your crystalline structure. And what do these things do? They destroy the crystalline structure. So when you bring that back, you start feeling great. You start feeling good. Even like I said, even just drinking out a cup or whatever, you start feeling charged, right? And that's the thing. In my opinion, that's the threat to the system because a healthy society is unstoppable. That's how I
Yep.
see it. Because when they try to take all your health away, you can't do anything. You're weak and feeble, and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to
Then
do?
you become reliant on the system, and then like you have to use. Well, you think you have to use their products and their treatments and their therapeutics in order to, survive. So
Yeah,
that's all they're trying to do is disempower and disconnect us all the time.
yeah, and that's the thing. It's like when we start paying attention to that and we see that the true intention, and we can start bringing back the energy and the life force that we once had. And that's why even if you go to a certain place, right, like a certain mountain, you might feel a certain energy there. You might go up to Sedona and you feel a vortex. There's different things out there that you've just been disconnected to because they don't want people connected because then, like I said, people will unite, right? They're connected and their energy unites. They become stronger. And I always look at like the Haka dances in Hawaii and Polynesian islands. You watch kids do the Haka dance and they do the ceremony, and you feel the energy through the screen. Like you can feel, like you can hear the whole wall shaking.
100%.
That's
Yeah,
what they're.
my wife every time she watches the Haka cries. I'm not even
Yes.
exaggerating either.
Yeah, yeah. And now you do it in a sacred building, which is built out of certain materials that resonate on a magnetic and non-magnetic situation,
Mhm.
and you now have an energy life force generator or orgone, right?
Can
All
we talk about that real quick? Like the old world structures, like Tartaria, and some of the building materials that they use. And do you think that those devices or those buildings were built to, you kind of touch on a little bit, but harness free energy? And you said for the, to better proliferate plant life. But do you think it's also that those were used to heal human beings inside those buildings too?
Oh yeah. I mean, you look at the pipe organ, right? Let's just go with that example. Perfect example. Why was that the first thing they always destroyed? Right? That was the first thing that always left. The pipe organ was gone, and now you got this little dinky pipe organ that looks like
Yeah.
garbage and whatever. But you had this massive thing, and we know that when you play certain sounds at 432 hertz, it actually can structure your body, right? So if you hear 432 hertz, it structures all your cells. But if you hear 440 hertz, it actually destructures your cells and they fall apart.
Mhm.
So if you walk into a sacred building, let's just go with a church to make it easy, it always faced to the east, right? Churches always face to the east. This is the first and foremost thing. Why do they face to the east? Because the energy is the least in the east, right? So that's the first important part. Then you got the north and the south, which is the highest points, which is where people sit. And you have the western part, which is the highest point of the magnetism. When you plant a plant to the west, you'll always see it go crazy. When you plant a plant to the east, you'll always not see it grow, right? So the energy is all in that building. Now the building is built out of different types of clays, which are magnetic and non-magnetic. So when sound is emitted, or chanting or prayer or any type of things, or organs, now the walls resonate, right? That's what you have.
Yeah.
So you have the walls moving like this, basically. Now, not only that, you have crystalline stained glass windows inside of there, which those crystalline stained glass windows are showing the structure of your water once you walk into that building, right? So when
Wow.
you walk into that, your cells, as soon as you get with the sound, your cells are going to emanate that frequency. And if you consume any water, which at that time would be consumed holy water, right? They give you a little bit. That holy water is structured water, which is resonating at that same stained glass window, right? So you're seeing that all basically, like all together as you're healing. Now, when you go into it of even farther, you can go to the top, which is like the steeple, right? Or the antennas that are up there. And those connect into, they had basically like little balls, and then let's say a cross or
Yep.
antenna, whatever it is that's on top, because all of them are different. So that's why I try to keep it, just basic. But there's a ball that was up there. That ball contained mercury. That mercury ball can spin based on the magnetic energy that's going on at the time, and then that can create free energy to bring that down into the whole
Mhm.
building. And then on top of that, because we're just taking it to one step farther, is that during the full moon, people could levitate, because what happens is you have a magnetic shift, and the building, when you chant or go into a deep meditation, would actually be able to cause you to levitate. You could hold, for example, your staff, which is usually made out of gold or copper, and you could actually cause your body to levitate because the moon is fully out at that exact same time. So you could levitate. So, you look back at all these old buildings, you look at all these things, and a lot of the work of like Philip Callahan and his work and everything else. And you start to see that he even explained, why were they building Celtic round towers and going to the top of them, right? Like the lady would let down her hair. How does that make any sense? She's getting attacked by some person, and she's going to climb to the top and then let down her hair so she can get saved and whatever else. You look at this and go, doesn't make a lot of sense. But when you find out that that monks, Celtic monks, used to go to the top of those towers, and that they could use those towers like a broadcasting system, and they could communicate between the two, and they could sync their minds and levitate their body
Wow.
to a higher status. Now you kind of see what it's there. And that those Celtic round towers or sacred buildings always align to everything in the sky, right? As you see up there, it's down here as well. So, a lot of these old buildings have been destroyed, and only some of them have been saved, I guess you could say. But it's interesting because, in my opinion, I found a spot, right? So we went to California. I went to Palm Springs. This was like last week. And we went to Palm Springs, and I found this old world building. And I know it's old world because the walls are so thick. I mean, the wall is literally bigger than the screen and bigger than this. And what was interesting was when I chanted in that area, it felt like I was like almost like floating,
Yeah.
right? Like you're like leaving. It was crazy. I mean, some guy came up and he was like wondering what I'm doing or whatever. But acoustics in that room were so perfect. I'm
Yeah.
talking like as if you're just in a symphony, or you're in, I don't even know how to explain it. Like you're at the orchestra, and it's just the perfect tuning, because these buildings were built with the perfect clays, the perfect the perfect geometry and all of that so that they could resonate at a frequency, you know. And when you get into those old world buildings too and look into like even John Levy's work and a whole bunch of
Yeah.
people as well, you know, you start to see a lot of stuff didn't make a lot of sense too, because they didn't have bathrooms, they didn't have a lot of things, you know. So it's really fascinating. Like the more I got into that and I started studying this the energy, it all started making sense, because a lot of these buildings are built on top of energy ley lines in which it's the strongest. And if they don't believe in those things, then why were they using those technologies like dowsing rods and all of these things? They said that they didn't want that, but a lot of the people who didn't believe in using those things to find energy were building their buildings doing the exact same thing. You know, so you see this, well, I don't do this, but in reality you were,
Yeah,
right?
and they were exactly.
That's-
Well, the most compelling thing to me about like all the old world Tartaria stuff is when you look at pictures of like late 1800s or early 1900s San Francisco or these other cities, and they're like super intricate buildings. And you mean to tell me settlers that were living in shacks on a horse and buggy built those buildings in a matter of like 2 to 3 years? Not a
yeah,
chance.
yeah. Horse and wagon, right? They were on
Yeah.
a horse and wagon, and their mule died of dysentery because they played the Oregon Trail, and that was what the whole reason of why, you know, it didn't work out or whatever else. And it just, yeah, when you look at these structures and you go, okay, you built this, like you built this thick of clay, right? This
Yeah.
clay is perfect. I mean, it's, you know,
Perfectly cut to like geometric. Yeah.
yeah, you know, you look at this and go, there's no way. And even here, like in Scottsdale, there's a not a fence, but like, yeah, like a fence, like down the street that looks like it's 25 feet tall. What on earth what did you need a 25-foot fence made out of stone and
Yeah.
clay? And that's the only remnants, right? They leave little bits and pieces of these things and they get rid of it. Or what I notice is they just inhabit and hijacked and like a parasite take over certain structures and then give a fake history to them and say that they were started in 1902, but in reality, they were never started in that time. The building was built long before that or recently. And then they make up a whole story and then they put a plaque and they put whatever so that they can make you believe. And that's what I realized. Our whole entire thing related to energy, history, and all of this is to just make it's Hollywood. That's all it
Yeah.
is. It's just a play to make people believe without us being actually connected and
Mhm.
understanding that we can be very connected, and they spend a lot of money making us disconnected and telling us
Yep.
fake things, you know, and that's kind of how I see it.
I need to have you back on to have like 5 other talks on like Rockefeller medicine, and then another one on primary water. We
Oh
could go into
yes.
so many different things. Probably you could probably do a whole episode on orgone. But I want to talk about Cultivate Elevate and some of your products that you have, because I've used your Shilajit, I've used your dragon's blood. I actually put your dragon's blood in lotion like you recommended for my face, and I feel like it's made my skin a lot more vibrant. I actually had someone comment to me the other day, "You look younger and younger each time," and I'm like, thank you for that comment. I'm already pretty young, but let's talk about Cultivate Elevate a little bit.
So we started Cultivate Elevate in 2020 during all the nonsense when it first began. And we started with one product, which was lion's mane. And then we've expanded ever since then. And I just try to keep bringing new superfoods to market, right? And just bringing things that we just haven't seen before. Because I realized that we could be using stuff from all over different parts of the world to heal our bodies. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. And that's what we should be doing. The divide and conquer tactic is we will just use one thing and that will somehow fix it. And for example, eating an apple pie is never going to fix anything because you've been eating apple pie for 100 years. It hasn't done the job. So
Mhm.
we do need different things and different sources of things. So we have our dragon's blood, which is from an ancient tree called the Draco tree, which is the dragon tree. And it's from Atlantean times. It grew in the Azore Islands, Canary Islands, South America, all over Indonesia, all over different parts of the world. But that tree that you just talked about is basically a tree that emits a type of sap that looks almost like blood. That's the best way to describe it. When it's cut, it looks like blood. And that tree sap is very healing because it provides the body with over 3 million antioxidants. It has the highest antioxidant value on the planet. And it has some of the most studies I've actually found out. Like they've studied it like crazy about how fast it heals wounds, how fast it helps the brain, how fast it can heal inflammation, how it can get rid of if you have like gut issues, H. pylori, parasites, oh, you name it. It's pretty much one of the oldest superfoods on the planet. And I've realized that when you connect it, it goes into Atlantean times. and all the Draco and all that stuff as well. So we have the dragon's blood, which you can use in smoothies, you can use it in tea. We now have a capsule version, which we're waiting to restock as well because it was flying off the shelves. But we also have shilajit, which provides the body with 84 of 102 minerals, which is a powerful superfood to help remineralize the body because we are missing minerals. It's very simple. All of
that's the frustrating thing about, like, you know, using reverse osmosis water systems to get everything out, is that then there is no minerals left in the water. So that's why it's so important to have things like shilajit to remineralize your water. I've been using your cold pressed shilajit like, I think I actually am completely out now, but that's the best shilajit I've used, it because it's the easiest to use too, because it's not messy. Most shilajits that I've used are like really sticky and hard to, like, you have to like paste and then like swab them inside your water, pour them over with hot water. But yours is cold pressed and you just literally pump it and squirt it into your water.
Yep. And then we have now the tablets too, which you can just pop and go, and it's the thing is, I wanted to keep the processing, right, to keep it at the most minimal point and keep it in the cold pressed way or the cold extracted way, because a lot of this stuff unfortunately gets overly processed. Like you just said, the gunk, right? Like when you're trying to take it out and it's in a jar, it's been processed 1,000 times. Like most people don't realize how much processing actually goes into that. And then that diminishes a lot of the energy, and that's a whole nother, that's like pasteurization. That's a whole nother one as well too.
So it's like pasteurization of shilajit that happens?
Yes. So what
Wow.
they'll do is they'll cook it at like 4,000 degrees, right?
Oh
And
man. So that's like depleting any nutrients or life inside that shilajit then.
pretty much. And then they'll mix it with some chemicals to make it stay, and this I've seen in patents, right? I've seen patents on this, and I've invested into looking into those as well too. So, we were big when we found our farmer out in Siberia, we were big on making sure that it stays the way it needs to be and that it's not going through an altered state and changing anything, like leaving it the way it is. And it's interesting because, that's the other thing of our issue that we face is the grocery store, the lights, right? We could have a whole talk about lights.
Man, yeah.
The lights are decimating the nutrient value. And then not only that, the shipping and all of this. So when you're going to the store, you're not getting the nutrients that you're supposed to be getting because it's been altered so much. And that's the problem a lot of people are facing is, you go to the store, you buy this and you're like, oh, it's X, Y, and Z. But it's like, well, did it go through a pasteurization process? Like if you bought almonds, were they pasteurized? Because if they were, there's no nutrients in them now, and they don't even mention this or even sometimes say it unless you find certain brands that say unpasteurized. So I noticed with the shilajit industry, same exact thing, and we're bringing a new shilajit soon to market. I'm working on this, which is going to be really cool. Different form and different type. But, that's the thing is everything I try to bring is to try to, at least in my eyes, combat or have a counter towards whatever nonsense that we're facing. Right. So if our brain is not working, lion's mane can work for our brain. If our central nervous system is too stimulated, you can try pearl powder or reishi mushroom because it will balance out the central nervous system. If your skin is suffering, you could try tremella. If you have breathing issues because of all the nonsense that they put up and whatever, cordyceps mushroom because it increases your VO2 max and your ability to breathe better. So, there's different superfoods and I started looking at the body as what body part is missing what, right? Because the issue that I faced when I was in the fitness world and in this whole, the bodybuilding and all the stuff, watching fitness and being a part of that it was carbs, proteins, and fats, right? That was it. And you just eat carbs, protein, fats, but you don't talk about what types of carbs, what types of proteins, what types of fats. And then if you go into even diets and what people eat, is it grass finished? Is it organic? Is it pasteurized? Is it raw? Like there's so many factors. And so what I started to notice is we need to eat for each organ. Each organ depends on certain nutrients. So like your skin being one of the largest organs, it depends on certain nutrients. So when we start to look at things that way and go, okay, my eyes are suffering and pearls are exactly the same DNA as my eyes and my teeth. Well, if I eat a pearl or a pearl powder, then that can actually help remineralize those areas. And that's how I started looking at, okay, if I need
like supports like.
It's like what? What'd you say?
Like supports like.
Yes. Yeah, because that's the way to look at it. And even like eating a carrot looks like an eye. So it's the exact
Yep.
same thing. We have to eat for what we're looking for depending on the area that's missing. So when we create products and try to release all of this, then I try to go, okay, what would help with this? And when we did Dragon's Blood, it just went nuts. Our Pearl Powder has gone crazy. Our Shilajit has gone crazy. We even have our 6-mix blend, which has a Mishima mushroom in there, which is known to pull radiation out of the body. It was a very fascinating mushroom that was used post-World War II when people were exposed to some radiation at that time. Basically, they noticed that when people were consuming Mishima mushroom, they had no radiation poisoning. And I thought that
Wow.
was really fascinating because it was coming from the mulberry plant. So I decided to put that mushroom in our 6-mix blend because I thought every person should be consuming this mushroom if that's the properties that have been shown with the studies. And I always try to cite every study and all of these things and try to show these things because, if you want to learn about more, there's also more options than me just saying, this is it and this is what it's going to do for you, because everybody is different. Everybody eats different, and I'm not going to go through what diet and whatever is whatever. Whatever works for people, I'm more than happy to support them on that. And same thing with our supplements. We provide many different ways to use them and to be able to consume them. So depending on whatever works for you, that's pretty much what it is. And our biggest motto when we started the company was just to get rid of the fear. There's always solutions to everything, right? You can have things.
Amen.
If you're suffering from some skin issue, if you're suffering from some brain issue, whatever it may be, nobody should live a life of suffering. That's kind of how I see it, because there's too many people who are suffering from health issues and they have no idea why it's happening. And it could be just something in their terrain, which is just messing them up, like LED
Yep.
lights or certain foods or whatever, and they just aren't aware. So I try, when you said, just to wrap it all back into the beginning of Jack of all trades, I tried to hit every single different thing when I was learning so that I could provide a solution to everything in somehow, so that if a person is suffering, that they would have an option. Because sometimes it's like the littlest thing, even like the lights, like my light's getting dark, my incandescent's getting dark as we speak. But these little things, like, we don't realize how much they're impacting us on
Yeah.
the cellular level, right? Because that's what they're doing. They're destructuring the cells.
Yep. Man, I need to get you back on, like I said, for a few more episodes because it just hit me too that you're so knowledgeable on EMFs and radiation, and that'll have to be another episode. We'll get you back on. Maybe you'll be a recurring guest every month or something like that, so we can have a chat about something in depth because you are a wealth of knowledge, man. It's always a pleasure talking with you. I know you could talk about so many different topics. So, is there anything else you'd like to say to wrap up this episode?
I think we covered it all on this topic. We probably can go on.
Yeah.
Like you said,
I
all
mean,
the
dude, we went like an hour and 20 minutes just on electroculture and a few other
others.
things. That's pretty incredible.
Well, I think they all relate, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
as I started learning, like you just said, it's how everything is connected, and we really need to pay attention to that, because
Yeah.
we always get pulled, in my opinion, a bait and switch of marketing or a bait and switch of this, where they say it's this, but in reality, it's over here, and I feel like we really have to start looking at things like that and paying attention from every angle, because that's the only way to say, okay, what am I missing, right? Like, what part am I not seeing with this nonsense that they're
Yeah.
trying to put up on, the television and whatever else. It's just, and that's what we saw with 2020, right? That was my whole eyes. I mean, was really seeing, I'm being told one thing, but I'm not looking at something over here. And I'm not looking that something doesn't exist. And I'm not
Yeah.
looking at all of these things. But, I'm being told this, and I got to do these supposedly protocols, but then these protocols aren't really rules. You're just making them up.
Yeah.
So, it really made me, 2020 really made me start to question everything. And then also then question everything we've been doing as a society that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Like, that just,
That's such a good point too, because a lot of people are resistant to the phrase the new normal for good reason, right? But the reality is the old normal that we were experiencing prior to 2020 was not one that was where we're connected with the earth, connected with each other, living in harmony by any means. So when people are saying they want to go back to the old normal, I don't want to go back to the old normal. I don't want the new normal that, in air quotes, their new normal that they're trying to create, but we definitely need a new normal for society, for human beings living in community with each other.
I agree. And that's what we've been separated from. And we always go yin, we always go red to blue, right? Alternating just one to the other. It's like this and this and this and this. And it's like, maybe there's actually a path in between. Maybe we need to take what we've learned from both sides and then go, okay, maybe we need to go this way. Because clearly both of these ways, like you were even saying, and I always say that too, because even if you look at real simple example, you got oil cars and you got electric cars. You have nothing in between. That's it. And they just keep switching. First it was electric, then it's oil, then it's oil, now it's electric.
False dilemma, because there's free energy. I've been saying the same thing, man. It's a false dilemma that they're setting up.
Yes. So then you see that and you start to go, well, I don't want either one of those. I just want to live in abundance and I just want people happy and healthy. And that's it. And we can all be that way. And it's much easier to be that way than to have headaches and then also worry about all the nonsense that we had in the past as well, too. Because like you said, in the past, it was not peachy either. There was a lot of chaos that also existed. And the difference was, in my opinion, they could get away with a lot more chaos. At least this is how I see it now. Because the only thing that stops pretty much total chaos altogether is the internet. And me and you even connecting in this talk right now allows people to learn something in maybe a different topic that they never knew, which we never had access to. And that's why I go back to talking about the books that I ordered that went missing. Back in the day, if you didn't get the book's gone. There's nobody to call. There's no customer service. There's no nothing, So we have to take a little bit of everything and utilize it to move forward. Otherwise, we'll just keep repeating the same thing, and it drives me nuts to do the same thing over and over again. Otherwise, we just keep repeating that over and over again.
Amen, man. Amen. I couldn't have said it better. Matt, appreciate you, brother. We'll have you back on again here soon to probably talk about EMFs, and then another one to talk about primary water, and then another one to talk about Rockefeller medicine. We'll just keep on having you on as a recurring guest. You're the man. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. Electroculture sounds super rad. So thanks, Matt. Appreciate you, brother.
Till next time.